Coming up on Network Africa. Head of the French army says future of Sahel region is dependent on what happens in 2020. South Sudan's leaders well on their way to meeting a new deadline on a unity government. Plus, on this International Migrants Day, the UN said all migrants are entitled to equal protection of all their human rights. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. France Chief of Staff General Francois Lecointre says the year 2020 will make a turning point for Africa's Sahel region as events will help shape its future. He did warn, though, that if chaos continues in the region, then the Islamic State group would most likely fill the vacuum. He has also warned that he will need more military action to defeat the impending upsurge and should be looking more towards a political solution. I beg your pardon. Countries in West Africa have been involved in combating the insurgents, with Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali and Mauritania bearing the brunt of the group's attacks. All 5 countries have put in place a counter-insurgency force supported by French troops to fight the militants. General Lecointre has defended the presence of 4,500 French troops fighting jihadists in the Sahel and said France will soon be taking the battle to the next level. Let's talk to security expert Mr. David Otto in London. Mr. Otto, thank you for joining us. Let's begin with your take on the prediction by the French Chief of Staff about the future of the Sahel as regards security.
The future of the Sahel is in great jeopardy because, of the capacity of the jihadist terrorist organizations that are now operating within the region. The difference, which is going to be quite concerning, is that these jihadist forces linked to both Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which has collapsed, physically from Iraq and Syria. These groups have now amassed, the kind of weaponry that they are now taking the fight, to the military forces of the Sahel. We have seen that in recent attacks, which left 71 Nigerian forces, dead, in the village of Init. And this tells you that, this is a region that is highly, concerning, not just for the French, but for the Sahelian region. And this is despite all the operations Barkhane, the G5 Sahel, that, has been initiated. It's a huge concern. And 2020 would be a breaking point if the situation remains unchanged.
Yeah, now that brings us to how well armies of the G5 have performed so far. Do you think the insurgency has been brought under control?
It hasn't been brought under control. I think, it's at its worst situation. It could even be worse, come 2020. I think what needs to be done is that individual countries in the Sahel, that's the Lubtako-Guma area, that's Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, the Lake Chad region, including Nigeria. These countries have to come together, and then form, a united front whereby they can tackle the root causes of these jihadist organizations. How do they recruit? How do they get their weapons? These are the key things, which are important in terms of, the way forward with countering jihadism in the Sahel.
And now France is talking about taking the battle to the next level. Can we hazard a guess on what that could be?
I think the best way to the next level is to build the capacity of within the Sahel. The key thing, because they have about 4,500 troops in that region.
Mr. David Otto, it seems like we're having some audio issues with that, but thank you so much for joining us on the program. South Sudan's leaders are well on their way to forming a transitional unity government, even if they fail to resolve all their differences before a new deadline. Mr. Salva and Machar signed a peace deal last year under pressure from the UN, the US and regional powers to end a 5-year civil war and agreed to form a unity government. They, however, pushed the deadline back by 100 days, prompting the US recall its ambassador and raising fears there could be a return of the civil war. Both leaders blame each other for not meeting milestones stipulated by the peace deal, especially the integration of different fighting forces. They also agreed on the number of states the country created in 2011 should have. Meanwhile, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on 2 of the country's senior officials for their role in perpetrating the conflict, saying it was ready to impose other measures on anyone seeking to derail the peace process. Staying in South Sudan, head of the United Nations mission in the country, David Shearer, on Tuesday, told the UN Security Council that its leaders will now determine its future for generations to come. He was briefing the council via teleconference from South Sudan, recalling last year's peace agreement and highlighting improvements in security, saying that the preservation of the current ceasefire will be absolutely critical.
Choosing to sign the peace agreement last year, parties kick-started a transformative process that has already paid dividends. The country has witnessed a steep decrease in civilian injuries, abductions and casualties. And while sexual violence remains an abhorrent problem, the 295 victims recorded in 2019 is substantially fewer than the almost 1,300 reported in 2018. Improvements in security have also prompted at least 645,000 people to return to their homes. But the choice to delay a transitional government twice has dampened initial hopes, eroded some trust and confidence, and caused people to suspect that the political will between the parties is waning. The choices that South Sudan's leaders make now will determine this country's future for generations to come. Dr. Riek Machar's presence in Juba over the past 5 days for face-to-face discussions has been very encouraging and essential, as we have all known and noted, to resolve differences. As yet, however, there is no resolution of his uncertain status, and he is yet to be given a South Sudanese passport.
African Affairs analyst Chukwuemeka Eze joins us now to talk some more about this. Mr. Eze, thank you for joining us on the program. We have been here before. South Sudan's leaders agreed to form a unity government and then backtrack on the commencement date. What factors are militating against the start of a unity government for this young country?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I was asking what factors are militating against the start of a unity government for this country, South Sudan.
Can you hear me?
It seems like Dr. Chukwuemeka Eze can't hear us. So we'll be coming back to that story. In the meantime, a senior Somalia delegation has made a 3rd stop in the series of consultation of the country's federal member states in Kismayo. There, it held meetings on how the country can implement the national priorities it has set for the coming year. The delegation comprised the EU's ambassador to Somalia, Nicholas Belanga, the African Union mission in Somalia's chief of mission support, Major General Fidza Dludlu, and a senior advisor of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, Jamal Ahmed Ibrahim. The 4 officials held meetings with Jubaland President Ahmed Mohamed Islam, elders, civil society representatives and opposition leaders, acknowledging that the political situation in Jubaland remains unsettled.
As 2019 draws to a close, we are reflecting on the progress made this year and looking ahead to 2020 as a critical year for Somalia. We are here to engage with a range of stakeholders and to hear their views on how key national priorities can be achieved in 2020. These include preparations for one-person, one-vote elections, finalization of the federal constitution, continued progress toward debt relief, and the fight against Al-Shabaab. Ahead of this critical year, representatives of some of Somalia's multilateral partners are engaging with national authorities, federal member states, elders, and civil society across the country. In Jubaland, the political situation remains unsettled. But Jubaland and its people will have their role to play in the work to achieve Somalia's goals in 2020, and we did not wish their views to be overlooked. The visit afforded the opportunity to understand directly from the stakeholders in Jubaland the issues that continue to divide them and what solutions may be possible through dialogue, compromise, pragmatism, and prioritization of the national interest. Without peaceful resolution, the Jubaland situation poses risks for achievement of critical national priorities. We are grateful to the representatives we met today for sharing their ideas. Somalia's objectives for 2020 are achievable with the strong collaboration of all stakeholders. 2020 has the potential to be a historic year for Somalia. We encourage all Somali leaders, institutions, and communities to engage in dialogue, to agree a way forward, and to cooperate to realize the priorities agreed for the year ahead.
2 days after it declared a nationwide strike, government employees in Liberia have called off the industrial action. The workers had been striking over pay and benefits. Union leader Moiba Johnson says decision to call off the strike was made after consultations with religious officials and senior civil servants. The union was urged to reach an agreement with the government. Many of Liberia's civil servants have not been paid for months. The strike, however, spurred the government to disburse salaries for the month of October. Civil servants were expected to return to work as negotiations continue. Transportation can really be a pain, especially if there aren't many options. That could be one less problem for the Tunisian government, as a startup is now offering commuters an alternative. Intigo has just introduced what could be regarded as the country's first taxi scooter.
At least 30% lower than the price of an ordinary taxi, Intigo's taxi scooters are not only more affordable, but also easier and quicker to find on Tunisia's busy streets.
We launched the taxi scooter because we saw that the biggest obstacle for the Tunisian people is transportation, no matter their social group, age or gender. Everyone has a transportation problem. So we decided to provide a solution to this urgent problem that we are facing. But this is not our final goal. Our vision goes beyond that. We want to lay the groundwork for the prosperity of digital economy.
Passengers can order an Intigo taxi scooter using an app developed by the Tunisian startup. The cost of the ride is exhibited to the customer before the trip is confirmed, and the company only hires certified motorcycle drivers who are required to take several tests prior to their employment.
The idea is very good. It is going to facilitate the transportation of the people and passengers because we have a huge problem in public and private transportation. So the presence of this motorcycle is going to facilitate the transportation of citizens.
If the company's trial run proves successful by December, Intigo plans to distribute some 50 taxi scooters in the cities of Tunis, Ariana, Benarouz, and Manuba.
Stay with us on Network Africa, still to come on the program. Court awards Uganda controversial activist and academic 50 million shillings for being prevented from traveling out of the country. Stay with us.